Good morning and welcome to the Leadership in Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky to be joined by Carey Anne from Loop Insurance. Carey Anne, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing wonderfully. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, look, we will see talking very briefly, and I know Loop. Otherwise, I'd be very ill prepared. But it'd be really helpful if you could kind of explain the business and what it is that you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me on the podcast. I know it reaches many financial services professionals who are super familiar with the field of InsurTech and understand some of the landscape that's been going on right now in terms of companies recently IPOing, brand new companies into the space, really a dramatic transformation happening in the industry right now when it comes to using data, technology, and really a focus on fairness. So that's what Loop does. We launched a car insurance company that focuses on our mission to make car insurance more fair and transparent for more people by leveraging modern data and technology to deliver on a really amazing customer experience and product experience. So we launched recently in 2021, and we've been live in market selling auto insurance, learning a lot from our customers along the way. In particular, one thing that makes us very different is our focus on underwriting accurately and giving our customers great rates. So what that means is that we look at data that other insurance carriers ignore for no good reason. Things like whether the roads you're driving on are very unsafe to drive. Have they had traffic crashes in the past? When you're driving on them, are you driving under safe conditions? Is it snowing? Is it raining? And how are you behaving on those roads? Are you talking on your cell phone in the most dangerous intersection in all of where I'm based in Austin, Texas, and likely to get involved in a crash? Those things are super important to know when it comes to giving folks an honest and fair rate for insurance. But the things that don't matter, the things that we shouldn't measure, things like whether you can pay your bills and you have a high credit score, whether you own your home, you have the financial means to own your home, or whether you've achieved higher degrees. Myself, I'm very educated, but I don't think I'm any more of a good driver than my co-founder and co-CEO who graduated high school and dropped out of community college to found his first business. Mm-hmm. So there's a real important differentiator between what Loop does and what other insurance carriers or even new insurance technology companies in the space do, is that it really kind of comes down to how we think about the business of insurance and serving people in an honest and fair way.
Mm-hmm. I hear you, and thank you for that. And joking before we started recording that I'm always impressed by the professional manner and succinct manner, and that people who've raised money managed to get that over.
Yeah, it's good practice to get your elevator pitch down when a meeting can result in an $8 to $10 million check. It does really put your pitch in perspective.
Yeah, it sharpens the mind, right? It
does.
I should try it one time. I'm always amazed actually by it, just as an aside. I'm always kind of, I think my sort of view on starting businesses was always quite kind of, what would I say, kind of emergent from something I'm doing. So I worked in recruitment and now I run a recruitment company, and therefore it was kind of almost kind of never was about raising money. And of course you didn't need to raise sums of money because there's no tech involved, but it's a fascinating kind of experience. And actually I was going to ask you, this is the first time you've gone out and raised money to start a business? Before that was academia. Was this your first time raising money, raising capital?
Yeah, I can give you a little bit more of a background on me. I come from about a decade of building a very deep expertise in how to leverage data to build machine learning models. Mm-hmm. In particular, I found a really awesome public resource of data. This is free. It's like going to the library versus buying a college education, right? Mm-hmm. A free data set that was being published by the local and state governments that had incredible volumes of data, and is something I could play with and really explore and understand this question that I cared about, which was, where are car crashes happening? Mm-hmm. And are they happening in places that we expect? that we can anticipate, that we can prevent, because the benefit of actually addressing that question to me is a meaningful life purpose, right? Like making sure people are safe on the road and they get to where they need to go, and that they can get to work or get to daycare if they need to drop their kid off. And that there is sort of physical and structural inequality built into our world that maybe prevents some people from having an equal chance or an equal opportunity to get ahead. And so I built a career really around resolving this question of physical mobility and its implications on upward economic mobility. And that has taken me across academia. I do have a degree from MIT, and I founded a lab there called the Lab for Regional Innovation and Spatial Analysis, Larissa for short. We wanted it to be named something, a feminine name, because it is really being led by women. But to explore these questions of the living wage, like where can people earn a decent living? How hard is it to get there, to get to those jobs? But my career has gone outside of academia as well. I've worked for organizations, preeminent research organizations, the Brookings Institution, the Urban Institute, where I was leading some research related to the recession and how we bounced back from the recession. Different cities performing differently, different communities, different neighborhoods becoming more poverty stricken. Concentrated poverty, for example, went through the roof after the recession. But the point being that I've built a very deep knowledge in a very specific domain. And so when I was ready to launch a business around this question, it was really because I felt like no one else in the world was asking the right questions. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't realize how big is this opportunity. Because when you bring it to insurance, now you start to say, okay, if I can predict where car crashes are going to happen, and I can know which of my drivers are most exposed, and I can layer on their behaviors with real-time information from their cell phone and develop products from that, that's a big opportunity. Right. And so when I went out to raise venture capital, I think venture capitalists initially look at the market size of insurance and they say, oh, it's a $250 billion industry. This is like a huge market, checkbox. But then the next big checkbox is the ambition of the founder to build something that is transformative to the industry, that functionally, like what we're doing, changes the unit economics of insurance from the ground up. It doesn't accept that the average loss ratio of the market over the last 5 years is good enough, that it can be lower, that we can lower the actual risk of people being involved in a crash. And I first thought, okay, I'm going to pitch this to the big incumbent carriers. So my first business was, can I sell this to Geico? Can I sell this to Progressive? And that's where I built a lovely network of people in insurance and built relationships where people started to tell me, here's why this can't work within the boundaries of the institution as it exists today. And they started to help me realize that not only were the doors I was knocking on closed, they were locked, padlocked, like the institution wasn't going to change.
Well, why? Sorry, just to interrupt, but why wouldn't it work within those?
Yeah, it's a great follow-up question. And it actually is why I think investors are so excited about what we do, is that, there's this fallback kind of saying, oh, insurance is highly regulated. And so it's regulation that really makes it difficult. It's actually that I think that the technological infrastructure on which the entire insurance industry stack is built is not agile and not adaptable to the modern reality of how to operate a business, how quickly you need to move, the level of customer service and care you need, the data privacy and security infrastructure that you would want for your customers. Really, the technological infrastructure is archaic at best. And when you build a company and you build a product on top of a rotting technology infrastructure, you can never really deliver well on the customer province, because you're dealing with this like tech debt and legacy that it takes 10 years to transition. Well, in that 10 years, a new company like Loop can come in, implement sort of best practices as they exist today, have our entire stack in the cloud, incredibly secure, built in an agile environment with a modular customer policy administration system and a customer service, entire department built in Twilio that has text, live chat, phone, right? You can do these things from the ground up, and it builds a moat around you that investors say, wow, this is not just a $256 billion annual industry. This is actually a $256 billion annual industry that is ripe for the greatest technological transformation to hit it in the last 200 years. And so that's where you get the combination of big market, founders swinging big, and an opportunity with a little bit of a moat, enough of a moat around it that you can give yourself a shot at getting a foothold in the market, getting enough traction to be known, to be respected, have a reputation, build a loss performance, and continue to build a business.
I want to take it back a bit, because there's a lot to unpack there, and I'll get to that. Well, no, let's go for that now. I mean, I suppose you guys are not alone in tackling auto and tackling it differently, and I think a lot of people are kind of starting from the ground up, but without mentioning any names, it's kind of been mixed results in that.
Sure.
Why do you think that is? And I wanted to understand the kind of thing that makes you sort of different in that respect, because I think the promise has been similar. We're looking at data in a different way. We're building an agile tech stack. We're building it from the ground up. We don't have any legacy issues, but still they've run into poor underwriting profits, poor underwriting performance. What's going to get you guys to avoid that kind of situation that we've seen some of the other InsurTechs fall into?
Yeah, absolutely. So how I think of it is a little bit more macro. So we'll start at the macro and then we can get down to the micro specifics.
Sure.
At the macro level, I think insurance has gone through a couple waves of innovation. We talk about InsurTech like it's one behemoth, but there's been kind of eras of InsurTechs that have existed. So what Loop needs to do to thread the needle. Now, we are a company that has full intention on IPOing. This is not an acquisition play for us. So it is important that we have the growth of the roots of the world that comes with selling a mass market product to people that is in multiple states, that has multiple lines of business over time. That is an important facet to us. But we need to balance that with the underwriting integrity that comes from the underlying data and technology that we uniquely bring to the table. Now, there are some operational efficiencies that we can learn from the clear covers and the progressives of the world to implement in our philosophy. But the thing that really gives us a durable long-term advantage is the intellectual property that we sit on. We know who's likely to be involved in a crash and who isn't. And therefore, at the end of the day, we will likely compete on loss ratio. And that's one of our North Star metrics. Now, growth is interesting too, because I know you found Loop through social media. We're on a Discord, we're talking about NFTs, we are in Clubhouse hosting regular events, we're having in-person events all throughout the state of Texas. We're taking a very community-driven approach to growth. Virality, word of mouth, telling friends that this is a company that you care about and you want to put your money, you want to buy a product in, is the most important thing for us on the growth side. We're not looking to ramp advertising spending and like shove it down your throats that like you should have a jingle and a commercial and a mascot. No, it's about like actually building relationships with our customers. So when you pair that, like, hey, we're going to compete on loss ratio, and I think we also have an advantage when it comes to distribution. It's a super powerful play that sets us apart from those early incumbents that just focused on one thing or another and missed that. You have to do both really well. And yeah, that makes it harder, but that's how you succeed as an insurance company.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll get to the advertising and social media, I think, because I know, I think it was Geico. Was it Geico who came out and said, if you're not spending $1 billion on advertising a year in auto, you're not you're not even serious. This is the kind of expenditure. So
yeah, I mean, we raised $21 million in our Series A couple months ago, and Progressive spends that in a month. So we are not naive to the reality that we are taking on a market that spends a lot of money and that like needs to have, it costs a lot to play, right? Because it's so saturated. That's why you got to be in the places that other people aren't, and you have to do it in a way that you are actually organically part of that community. You can't drop into TikTok and put a LinkedIn post. It just doesn't speak to the people that are in those spaces. It's not designed for them, and it's immediately rejected like a host from the body, right? So what Loop is doing is paying attention to the modern forms of communication and the ways that people learn about new products today aren't necessarily only when they're watching Monday Night Football. It's also because they're spending a ton of time on social applications to educate themselves, like Discord. We actually host a bunch of events about like how to participate in Web3. Try to increase financial literacy and understanding about wealth building for our community is a way that we actually engage on platforms like Discord or like Instagram. We get a little saucy. We've got a couple memes out there that are a little bit like funny because that's how you communicate in Instagram. That's how you become part of that community. And I think insurance carriers have like kind of played pretend in social spaces, but they haven't actually let the creatives and let the people who are in marketing and in growth and in this brand new industry in a modern era actually lead. They've been taking direction from people who've done marketing from 25 years ago, which is important, but not the be all end all. And they've left the door fucking wide open for Loop.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Something I just anecdotally, like talking about the podcast. So, I've had some of the big players come on, not as many as I'd like. And mainly because if I'm talking to someone from an incumbent and then I go, oh, can you be on my podcast? It doesn't matter how senior that person is. It's like, I'll speak to comms and then there'll be like some 6-meeting process. And to be honest, someone turned around to me bluntly the other day and said, Alex, I'd love to, but I'm not going to jump through the amount of hoops I need to get on it. And I was like, that's insane. My podcast is, I'm not sitting here. Look, I'm not Joe Rogan, but
nor are you like not able to answer no and use your discretion as a guest to be able to say like, hey, I don't have the authority to talk on the loss ratio or performance of my book of business, but I have a thought that can contribute to this community and I want to engage with them is like really the missed opportunity.
Yeah. And mine was like, look, particularly when people are hiring or they're, it's like, it's an opportunity to present a human face to your business. Because, I wanted to talk to you about something that you mentioned at the start and we got carried away. We got into the meat and bones of it already, but I wanted to, fair and transparent is how you describe the business. Do you think, is the implication from that you don't think insurance as it is today is fair and transparent, or I mean, let's ask that question. I was gonna mediate it, but no, like let's just say it. Ask that question.
Yeah, I think that trust in financial services is broken, and the way that we build trust is through fairness and transparency. Because we've heard plenty of insurance companies say we're fair, we're honest, we're transparent, and those are all nice things that they write up on the wall and they walk past every day, but don't put into action. If we focus on the outcome that we need, the actions that we take are just the means through which we achieve that outcome. And the outcome we care about is actually trust. People have no confidence in their insurance carrier. They feel like they just bought a used car from a dealer and they don't know how they got ripped off, but they got ripped off. And a friend's going to tell them some trick 6 months from now that then they're going to switch because they have no fidelity to their insurance company. They haven't actually built any relationship with them. And if they have a relationship at all, it's a mistrust-filled relationship. That's the problem. And when you invest in building trust with people through social media, through being present and hearing them, interacting with them. Our head of community, Taylor, she's fantastic. She leads a team of people who just go out and listen to our customers and have conversations with them on a regular basis. We're investing in rebuilding trust in an industry that is broken. And that's, again, a hard problem to solve. But if you do it, and that's what we aim to do, if you do it, you've built a company that has dedicated, loyal, raving fans who don't just like you a little bit because you gave them a discount here and you slipped them 20 bucks there and you gave them a free gift card then, but that says when things go wrong, I'm sure that they're going to take care of me. Like, it gives me the chills that, like, if we could deliver on that customer promise, we'd be one of the only companies in insurance to do it. That's the problem. That's the issue we're addressing.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things that I want to pick up on, because I think it's the institution, it's the structural nature that we're talking about of the businesses. So one of my frustrations, just as a consumer, is when you're confronted with, I've got something at the moment. So I'm due a refund from a company. It's through work, so it's it's like for £1,000, right? It's a fairly large sum of money, and they keep trying to send me a check. And the check keeps not arriving, and I have to phone, and they have to reissue me a check.
Like, it's not even worth it anymore.
I know, when you go, but the person on the other end of the phone is just like, you can tell that they know this is crazy. Like, they're going, I know this is a crazy scenario. So bringing it back to our kind of example, I think everyone believes that generally most people are not trying to screw you over. Most people are trying to be fair and transparent as individuals. But I think you're right. I think structurally, insurance infrastructure and structure has created such kind of complexity that seems unnecessary, such kind of like a lack of kind of clarity about what the process is or what happens in the event of X. And one thing, and it leads into what you're talking about with this kind of social media engagement, because one thing that I had a conversation with someone to say, the UK is very price driven on most insurance for personal lines, but motor, home. And because the only touch point you have with your insurer is when you do your renewal. But that's only because the insurance company is not trying to engage with me on another, like, if they engage with me and added value. So if they find out, when Alex, we noticed that you keep driving down this road, or but it's, let's say, I don't know if this is what you're thinking, but let's say it could be that granular that you could go, oh, by the way, this is kind of quite accident prone at that time of night, you could take this route home, and actually, I'm just throwing it out there, but if there was any sort of engagement, financial literacy, anything that added value, it gives me other opportunities to build a relationship. So then it doesn't just become about price.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you're reiterating, and you've known Luke for maybe, a couple hours ahead of our call, and getting to understand what we're really about. You hit the nail on the head. It's a very obvious missed opportunity to actually build a relationship with your customer. And I think it comes actually full circle to the technological stack on which most of these insurers were built. And I come back to it as the root cause of their problems over and over and over again. It is not able to move as fast as marketing has moved. It is not able to learn the lessons of, okay, how did the customer actually receive this product, and adjust and change and revise without multiple years of implementation. And then if you operate in this methodology and you patch fix for decades, you're in a situation that is not possible to undo, also not possible to modify. You're stuck, you're grounded in a way, you're stuck with what you have, and you're trying your best to make it work. Versus a Lemonade, which I have to applaud. The founders of Lemonade were very smart about saying, we're going to get capitalized early enough to build the technology we need to own our own destiny, to be able to build whatever product we want to build on top, adapt to whatever user experience our users need, because that changes too. Like, it's smart for the insurtechs of this era to get capitalized enough, including Loop, get capitalized enough to own the tech stack, because otherwise, like, every single part of it is broken. I'm talking not just policy administration systems, what people talk about all the time, the big guys, Duck Creek, Guidewire, and that's a hot topic for conversation at every InsurTech conference, right?
Yeah.
But also the smaller things, like, and they're not even smaller, they're ancillary things like customer service. I think there's not a lot of technological advancement that's come to customer service. Roadside assistance, things that people actually like engage with as a consumer, are still really painful when you use a third party and you use the traditional approach, because it's just not kept pace with the times. So we're learning that the hard way. And in some cases, we're finding our customers tell us, like, you can't leave me on hold for 30 minutes when I need a tow. And that's how we're finding out in some cases that, like, oh, when you're out of state, this just doesn't even work. Okay, like, it should fix. This shouldn't be something we then say, like, well, that's the customer's problem or the customer's fault. It's that our technology and our vendors and the people who work with us need to be as thoughtful and as forward thinking and as progressively minded about how we develop for customers, how we do product development in 2021, not still trying to do product development with patched project road mapping and a waterfall approach. That we can't work with. You can't even work with vendors who operate in that space. So in many cases, we have to build the technology ourselves. It's a real challenge and a high cost, right? Because tech ain't cheap. Engineers do not get paid less than 6 figures for the most part, right? You actually may need to make a pretty significant financial investment in doing that, and know that you're actually going to have to build a lot of the things yourself as well. But that's the opportunity, right? Like, if you can get enough capital in the door to be able to own your own destiny, then you can compete long term.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing I wanted to ask you, which going back to this kind of transparency, what does it mean for you from a culture perspective internally, for forgetting the kind of business side of it? What does it mean for, I think you call them loopers. Do you call them loopers? You must call them loopers.
There's all kinds of really bad names. I will say I'm not like the best at naming things. So I try not to be involved in the naming of things, but loopers, loopies, I've heard all kinds of things. They call themselves that, is the irony. It's like, it's crowdsourced. It's not us telling them we want to call you loopies. They're like, we're loopies. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. So you can't stop what the crowd says in this case. But the question, again, I've totally derailed, is,
what does transparency mean to you, forgetting the kind of business side, but culture, employment experience?
Oh my goodness. Cultural values are incredibly important, and building a diverse organization has its challenges. I think most of insurance is focused on, like, we need more diversity, we need to be more inclusive. Well, what happens when you get on the other side of that fence and you have 15 different countries represented in your first 30 employees, 8 different languages spoken, and even diversity of men, women? You have parents, you have older people, you have young professionals, you have a CTO who's 26, a high school dropout co-CEO who's formed multiple businesses and built venture capital, a 57-year-old white man from insurance helping to build your insurance culture, and me, some tech geek that has been doing data science for their whole career. Like, it's a mixed bag. That comes with really cool, different challenges that maybe we were ill prepared or ill conceived around discussing, because transparency comes a little bit easier to us. We just have a culture of having conversation when we need to have conversation, leaning into yellow flags, having a lot of structure and thoughtfulness into making meetings meaningful, having meetings that are focused on team. So we kick off each week with a weekly, but then we end each week with thank yous, opportunities for appreciation, gratitude. There's all kinds of, like, things that companies today do that insurance carriers never did, but we could be different. But I will say there are these new challenges that we're facing, just to be honest and vulnerable, that like people have different forms of communication, right? In an insurance company where you have a lot of people from insurance who understand insurance, who've been in insurance forever, you don't face challenges of, what are our legal obligations for marketing in the context of a regulated industry of insurance, right? You need to face these challenges that bring together cultures that are completely dialectically different in many regards, and then themselves are diverse among their own teams, coming with their own experience, their own chips on their shoulder, their own ways of communicating, receiving feedback, taking feedback. It creates new problems that I think one day we'll have to write the book on how we deal with once we get to diversity. What do we do now? Because there's not a lot of guidance around how you manage very, very diverse teams, and how you build a unified culture among many people who do come from very different backgrounds. I guess the learning thus far has been mission. Focusing on mission is really important. Yeah. Why we're here, what we're doing is more important than how we do it. And that there will be periods, we use this little rubric that I found very helpful, hopefully maybe helpful to others, is you have forming, which is the beginning of a project. Everyone feels great. Everyone's excited to be working on something new. Then you have storming, which is like, it's fucking chaos. Shit's broke. We need to move fast. Shit's upside down. Then there's norming. Okay, how do we like implement a project plan and make sure that this becomes routinized and systematized? And is it a good thing that we should continue doing? And having conversation about bringing things into production, which is in the final step. So it's forming, forming, storming, norming, and then performing.
Yeah.
If we can get to performance, fantastic. So it's just kind of working through, and I guess like problem solving as they arise, which is the fun part of being in a startup company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I love that. And there's such a better awareness around that now. And I think about it a lot. It was a long time ago now, because I've been working for myself for a long time, but I worked at a company where I was 27, and unusually for a recruitment company, I was one of the youngest people in the room. But the person that was running all the kind of like parties and the Christmas and the summer party and the kind of was like 24, and they just didn't read the room. So we turn up at these events and we got this like exclusive nightclub, and like most people are like young parents, and they're just like, and we had a lot of older, like, because it was a search business, so we had some older people, and they were just like, why are we here? Like, we don't want to be here. No part of any of us want to be here.
There's some funny things that happen where you're like, okay.
but it was so funny because the girl who put it together was like having the time of her life, going, this is amazing. We're like, no one wants to be here but you. But yeah, so it just really made me think of that. I was like, okay. But being conscious of your time, and I know this is going to open a big, probably the biggest topic, and I've saved it to last. I wanted to ask you, fair and transparency. I know I've mentioned it in about 3 of my questions, but you're using artificial intelligence, right, to provide fair and transparency. That's been a massive hot potato. I know you're at MIT, and MIT led the way in how talking about how bias is actually baked into some of AI. So just from a kind of technical perspective, how do you avoid that? What are you doing to avoid that? How are you kind of ensuring that you're not doing the opposite with your kind of tech?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first step is to think about it a lot, right? To make a commitment to actually considering these things when you're designing, when you're developing, when you're hiring, even before you begin doing projects. When you're looking at data, when you're cleaning data, you should be mindful of and be having a constant conversation in your own head and within our teams to make sure that we're keeping this subject top of mind and not falling behind on just keeping pace with the rubric, but really thinking progressively about how do we make good on our own commitment to this. But I will back up a half step and say, it's also a new era for AI.
Mm.
And this is something I'm having a lot of. I'm feeling like I'm stepping into the sunlight on a little bit more because there is no voice speaking the truth that I feel is true,
Mm.
which is that the first era of AI was largely dictated by white men, just demographically,
Mm-hmm.
but also not particularly the most ethical sect of the white male category, right? You have Peter Thiel at Palantir, like using AI to do drone strikes and kill Americans abroad. You have Mark Zuckerberg building Facebook and trying to exploit 13-year-old children to become customers, regardless of their mental health. You have like, I mean, in Facebook, there's many other examples too. Like the whole thing was founded on rating women as to whether they were hot or not, like built on a culture of misogyny. Like there's, there are plenty of great white men in the world, but like they haven't necessarily been leading the AI revolution. And there's a reason, is because it is unregulated, it is unchecked, and bad behavior is efficient behavior sometimes. It's also very lucrative behavior sometimes. And so we've ended up in a situation where we've lacked a really purposefulness around why we're using AI and what kind of problems we're going to address using AI. We should not be doing teacher performance. We should not be doing human resource performance. We should not be doing things that are deeply human activities because AI isn't good enough to do that just yet. Mm-hmm. However, if I want to predict where a traffic crash is going to happen, and I have millions of car crashes over decades on that road, really subjective observations of things happening that have happened in the past, yes, we need to accept, and yes, we need to review how our bias may affect our measurement at that step, but like a relatively subjective measure. And what I'm aiming and what I'm building an outcome for, what I'm building a model for, is to optimize for the reduction of traffic crashes and fatalities. So I'm looking to build something that isn't saying like, is Carey Nadeau a 10? No, I'm looking to build something that says, if Carey Nadeau gets in her minivan with her car full of children to go to soccer practice, can we give them intelligent information from and using AI that can augment her own brain's ability to understand and perceive risk and mitigate risk or avoid risk altogether? If we're building for those purposes that enrich people's lives, make people better off and safer, and at every step checking for bias to make sure that not only are we not hurting anyone or hurting a specific group of people, but that we aren't not getting better for everyone at the same level, right? We can't just do something well. We can't build models just well for urban dwellers when there's suburban poverty. We can't just build models well for people that have great credit scores, because there's a variety of reasons why your credit score might be bad. You may be a financial risk, you may have made an investment, you may have had a health crisis, you may have had COVID-19 happen to your family, for Christ's sakes. Like there are really sort of a fundamental revisiting of values that needs to happen in AI that I am leading. And I need to step into that light a little bit more and put on that cloak. But Loop is making that a very public statement that it's not necessarily just about transparency of black box AI, that like what goes into the model is the problem. It's what are we actually building the AI to do? How can we build trust in the process of how we do it, that you find the results reliable, useful, and they meaningfully improve your life? If we can do that, then it's not that we need to hide, it's that we've built trust with our consumers.
Because what's interesting is, and thank you, and obviously a lot of that I'm hugely applaud, and I completely agree with you. What's interesting, we've got through this whole conversation and not talked about price, and I think that's reassuring, because I know that your model generally is giving people better, fairer, cheaper quotes, right? I can read that, and anyone else can read that on your website. But I think the important thing is just giving people access to insurance when they might not have been able to get it. I think that's the mission, because insurance as a principle is golden. It works. It's great. It's just the fair distribution, fair pricing of, and access to, that we need to improve, and that's what we kind of want to see.
I have a personal life philosophy that just take care of each other. That's should guide every decision that we make. And that is fundamentally the underlying essence of insurance, is that we're going to take care of each other. The challenge is making sure that we're taking care of each other equally, that we're not taking care of some people with premium service and some people with non-standard, subpar. I mean, we can put all kinds of different labels on it, but we all know what it is.
Yeah.
Everyone should be cared for the same. And I think that the data that we can bring to the table to actually measure how there's injustice and how there's inequality in product and service and experience helps us then inform how we move everybody forward together. Because unless we're taking care of people that have low credit because they had a financial or health circumstance, but they're otherwise great drivers, they are mispriced. They are overpriced. Their risk does not equal their rate. So one model is not built for them. A model that reflects their reality needs to come to existence at the same time as servicing everybody else. And data is what enables us to make those really good decisions, to be able to build a customized, really specific to you risk profile and guidance to help you get better. Because at the end of the day, if you get better, I make more money because you get in less crashes and you are safer. At the end of the day, you get in less crashes too. So like, it's optimizing to the benefit of both, but our optimal outcomes are aligned. I want you to crash less.
I'm going to have that be the closing statement of the podcast. I want you to crash less. So
it's that simple.
Yeah, it's that simple. Carey Anne, I'm really conscious of your time. Thank you so much for being a guest. I've really enjoyed it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, really. I feel like this is one of my top 5 podcasts, so you're doing something right. I'm going to make sure our audience comes to this one, because it was it was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.